and several caveats when it comes to demand generation implementation. We have received a couple of great questions from our community, and most of them were, okay, can you show how the demand gen works? Any practical programs? Because for many people, demand generation could mean multiple things, right? You can ask 10 B2B marketers and they would provide different definitions, from like ungate everything, deliver value, and the pipeline will come soon, to like, oh, that's like a sophisticated ad strategy, so our demand gen function is in place, it's just basically running ads everywhere, right? So we want to share the practical examples what actually demand generation means. And aside from this, cover a couple of questions from the community about dark social, about measuring demand gen. And then next week, we want to host another episode, basically covering all the typical concerns and questions we are hearing from sales and from leadership, and sharing with you examples on how to tackle these specific, let's say, objections whenever you hear them. As always, we kick it off with my dear co-founder, Vladimir, and we have prepared a deck that we want to navigate you through. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. And the first thing we would love to ask you guys, where you all join us from. Let us know in the chat.
So as always, joining from Spain, the Valencian region, myself, the city of Valencia, 𝗪𝗲𝗪. And while the folks are typing and sharing where they are calling, hey, Paul from London, wanted to jump into the first example here. Andre, if you can just help me. Like this, yes. Before we start sharing concrete examples, or like we called it, real world demand gen examples, wanted to share this objection that we got from one of our clients when we were working on the plan for their program. And the objection for those who are listening went on something like this. Oh, the examples that you share here are very optimistic, that actually the ICP leaders, decision makers, are going to personally engage with your content, and that they will write to you and tell you what they think, and then spend time to go back and forth with you. This doesn't happen. This is not how real life works, unfortunately. As Andre promised, we'll dive deeper into other kinds of objections that you may get from sales and from the executive team during our next episode. But we wanted to dive more deeply here. Actually, based on this example, based on this objection, we developed these examples to show how this actually does work in real life, right? And I get this, right? I get it, as Andre mentioned, if the advice about demand generation is kind of like show up and create value, or ungate all of your content and wait for the demand to be created. Of course, we know this is not enough, and that's why we need to share these examples also with some caveats. But what would be interesting for me, if you have any other objections that you get, please share them in the comments. We might address them now, and definitely we'll dive deeper into those objections next week. So without further ado, let's just jump into and share the first example of how it actually works in real life. And here what you can see is actually a snippet from a sales call transcript. It was a sales call, a discovery call that I had with the head of marketing from a very large, decently large, I think more than 50K employee, high-tech enterprise that reached out to us and There was an inbound opportunity. I had a conversation, I had a discovery call. And what's interesting, you can't read this probably, so I'll just like read some highlights from the transcript of that call. He mentioned that, I think I've been to 1 or 2 webinars. Usually when people say webinars, they mean these live podcasts as you're attending right now. And I also received a newsletter, and it was a combination of both the last newsletter, and he said we were just at that time evaluating where we are, and it was at the very right moment, and the way that he said it, when the pain was really quite high. So I think, et cetera, et cetera. So what I wanted to really highlight here, the couple of things that I read from this comment is relevance. So he said the pain was quite high, and the content that was shared was about those pains. So it was hitting them where it hurt. It was extremely relevant to their situation. So we can talk about that. Like why like no amount of bottom of the funnel, middle of the funnel, top of the funnel, call it what you want, content is going to cut it if it's not really very well aligned with the pain and the challenges that your target accounts have. We have frameworks we shared, and we can dive more into that in a moment. But this is like the first thing. The other thing is we haven't seen this gentleman at all. We haven't seen him on LinkedIn. We haven't seen him really engage. We do have like more than 22,000 newsletter subscribers, which we don't monitor daily. So he was probably there. Maybe we saw him attend one of these events, but I never really noticed them. And it's nothing actually unusual with that, because actually a lot of senior buyers will be quote unquote silent. They will silently engage and will only raise their hand or start a conversation when it's really, really relevant for them. And another thing that you can observe, they're not going to do this right away. They're not going to do it right away until they're going to wait until it's relevant. But also, it took probably, I don't know, in this exact case, we don't have the data, but I'm sure it took multiple touch points. It took probably multiple months. And we know from data from other prospects that it can take up to 2 years before they are ready to reach out to you. So I don't know, Andre, if you have other thoughts about both the objection that I shared and the example here, if you have any other reflections, and maybe also about practical solution for, okay, how can you make sure that your content is relevant and that it's seen multiple times by your buyers?
I actually wanted to add a few points about this specific opportunity. In our organization, and I'm not saying necessarily that it's the right way to do things, but for us, we don't really care about like multi-touch point attribution because we know this very well. We have observed data, and we know, like, we're pretty clear on what influences the decision-making process, right? But specifically for this opportunity, it started actually from our Fullfunnel Summit. And how did I know about this? 6 Sense, they have partnered with us. They sponsored the last summit, and they actually reached out saying, hey, yeah, so we know that you guys are chatting with this company. Do you have in mind the ABM platform for them? So that was kind of the trigger point for me. So from that point, Summit was the top. And coming back to the, let's say, marketing slang you mentioned, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, etc., right? Fullfunnel Summit is the activity that we do first for our community. And by the way, we are going to host already 6th annual Fullfunnel Summit in 1 month on 25th, 26th, and 27th of March. I dropped the sign up link in the chat so you guys can join us. We do it every year, and obviously for our company, it creates a huge brand awareness. A lot of people, the way how we vet the speakers, the way how we validate the content, the presentations is really much above the expectations that people have, they share it, and this is what attracts the attention of these target accounts, right? So that's the key. Then, like Vlad mentioned, there was no visible engagement. This wasn't the person who was liking or commenting our LinkedIn post, or who was coming for these events that he has mentioned, right? And he was actively participating, asking questions, whatever. Never ever we saw any significant engagement. But this is the reality, and this is partially an answer to the dark social, or I mean, dark social could be another story, but this is basically this is a point that validates that the major part of the buyer journey is invisible. You have no idea what's going on. There is no engagement or intent signals from these accounts, but it also doesn't mean that nothing happens. A week ago, we hosted an episode about our account-based content strategy. And basically, this is the breakdown. This is what you need to have in place to holistically influence the buyer journey of these accounts. That's the first thing. The second one, about coming back to the relevance and the quality of that content, right? One of the key principles that we take is we flip the funnel. We don't look at the keywords. We don't ask ChatGPT to brainstorm, and hopefully after my today's post, less people would be doing ChatGPT created content. The jokes aside, so we don't ask ChatGPT to create content plan for us. Instead, what we do, we analyze the calls with our clients, we define the repetitive patterns, and then together with Vlad, we create the best possible answers to these questions, right? We don't care, honestly, about how many organic views we'll get, etc., because the key point, like we always share this litmus test, and I think this is the cornerstone pillar for your demand gen program, right? Is your content good enough that your VP of sales would be willing to send this, let's say, piece of content, article, PDF, whatever, in private message to the strategic account or to the key enterprise prospect? Because if the answer is no, you know that your content is bad. As simple as that. And the second answer is if you are willing to spend money on promoting this content. Sometimes, obviously, companies can go nuts and do the distribution of mediocre content, but obviously we're not talking about these companies, right? The key point is, are you sure that this content is so good that this content will actually create awareness and somehow nurture the strategic accounts, right? That's the key. If your answer to those 2 points is no, or you are not sure, then it means that your content needs a significant improvement, right? So these are the key points about the content part, right? And content also is a kind of cornerstone pillar of any demand generation program.
Let's wanted to add a quick comment. Excuse me, Andrea. I just wanted to add a quick comment there. So what you said, we don't really care about the organic views and engagement. And I'm sure that a lot of you have noticed that LinkedIn has reduced engagement for a lot of people while maybe promoting more, vertical videos and other types of content that is popular. What I wanted to share about that was that actually, as the engagement of our content, we have seen the same, was going down, actually our pipeline stayed the same in terms of the volume, but the quality of pipeline has improved. And still, the majority of people who do contact us mentioned that they first discovered us via our LinkedIn content. So just wanted to drop there. It's about the quality of engagement, the depth of engagement that you're engaging your ICPs. Now, I wanted to use this opportunity here, this second example here, to highlight one very practical framework that might be helpful for you when you're thinking about what kind of content to create. And it is what we call cluster decomposition. So what we do is we constantly evaluate all our opportunities and best clients, and we segment them into so-called account clusters. What are account clusters? Those are groups of accounts who have similar challenges, who have a similar use case and similar challenges. For example, the previous one was about, let's say, kind of traditional marketing based on MQLs, PDFs, gated webinars, and other content that is not effective anymore. And companies are looking to increase their marketing sourced revenue. In this case that we are sharing right now, it is about, it is a different kind of cluster, which is companies who have an existing ABM program and are looking to quote unquote revamp it. This was actually a word one of our clients used, and we always like to use the words of our clients. So the first thing that you also always want to understand when it comes to your ICP as it relates to your demand generation strategy is not so much the firmographics and the technographics and other characteristics, which are extremely important for your ABM program, right? But you want to understand these use cases and challenges as they relate to those use cases. So somebody who is struggling with marketing source revenue and ineffective marketing will probably have, you know, challenges that are related to how they're working with sales. Maybe sales is ignoring their leads. Maybe they have lost trust of the sales organization. They will have challenges in kind of like proving the value in their organization. They will have challenges, like I said, like their marketing needs not converting into sales, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody who has started an ABM program will have challenges related to if their program is ineffective, so they belong to this other cluster. We have another set of challenges as they are maybe struggling to get the results that they're hoping from that program. Okay, so just wanted to share this very practical framework. So you start by segmenting all your best top customers into segments based on the use cases and shared challenges. So this could be organizations from different industries. This could be sometimes, right, same industry as well. And then you identify what are the challenges that are related, that these accounts share. And then you do what we call challenge decomposition or a cluster decomposition. And we always have a series of questions that we ask ourselves. So questions such as, okay, for these strategic challenges that they have, what are the actual root causes of the challenges? What are some of the, we call them false solutions or mistakes? Like what are some of the ways in which companies are trying to solve those challenges that actually don't work? And then we ask ourselves, you know, a number of other questions. And speaking of mistakes, speaking of quote unquote false solutions, here you have an example of a content that is exactly written for the cluster of people who run, companies who run ABM programs and are looking to improve their program or are suffering maybe from underwhelming results. And it is about taking those challenges, breaking them down, and one of the questions, answering the question, what are the false solutions or the mistakes that companies make? So you will see a lot of times that we will talk about that. We will talk about the typical mistakes, such as the case here, which was a newsletter that Andrei wrote about the unobvious challenges that kill ABM programs. These were exactly the quote-unquote false solutions or mistakes, and where he really went into a lot of details and breaking them down. And we got quickly after that, after he published, very soon after Andrei published this on a newsletter, we got a submission in our mailbox saying, what are the kind of challenges that you're looking to solve? And the prospect, she said, ABM strategy and execution, we launched an ABM program recently, but seem to be doing exactly what you say not to do in your newsletters. So just wanted to highlight that example to show how we think about creating content that will impact your buyers using this practical framework of decomposing, the account clusters and the challenges, asking ourselves the questions about those challenges, and then creating the content that's aligned on that. And here is an example of how this might influence that. And I think there is another interesting point to be made about content here. I think I don't want to dive into this example. I think it's just to show that, yes, sometimes the ICPs do engage also on LinkedIn. I don't know if you have anything else interesting to highlight about this case, because I know that you know the history of this account. It's an account that we have been working on for quite some time, but in different because it's such a big company, on different geographies, etc. So it was, I think, from that perspective, interesting to see how demand generation can work across the different buying centers of your target account. But yeah, I think maybe you have more insight into that, Andre.
I would love actually not to dive into this example, but summarize a couple of important points about content, right? Just to make it as a summary to everything what we have shared. Content is a cornerstone pillar of successful demand generation. Your content should match or should pass this litmus test, right? Your VP of sales is willing to share it with the strategic accounts, and you are willing to spend money on it. Next, the best content comes not from the keyword research, not from the AI suggestions, but actually from analysis of your calls with prospects, with target accounts, and you create content that will help these people. And lastly, you need to accept the fact that the nurturing happens invisibly. You have no control over it, and you have no control of everybody in B2B has no control over B2B buying process, right? But what we can do is just accept that fact and make sure that we have the content in place that addresses everything from the jobs to be done, industry trends, and the things that are interested to your buyer persona, to specific points when they have a need, and you have enough, let's say, arguments why you should be selected. The entire point of this, I remember you once said this in one of the LinkedIn posts, it doesn't matter how we'll define the demand generation. What matters is actually that we get into considerations set of our target accounts, and we are also associated as a solution to the strategic challenges to this account. So when the buying trigger occurs, they think about you. That's the key, right? So lastly, you need to have the distribution layers of this content in place, right? As you can see, we have the newsletter, despite all the kind of funny advice that newsletters are dead and nobody is reading them. So we have distribution layers that are aligned with the channels our buyers mentioned to us. So we kind of try to distribute content the way they prefer to consume. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily need to replicate this strategy. It doesn't mean that you need to create LinkedIn content or launch podcast, because every single marketing community tells you that you need to persuade CEO to launch a podcast. It's the ultimate, it's the holy grail of demand generation, right? Obviously, no. Think about, we always mention this, think about the channels through what you can influence the buyer journey of target accounts. Sometimes it could be industry association, sometimes it could be industry thought leaders, right? Or even journalists. Sometimes you could initiate the kind of micro community on WhatsApp or Slack or whatever, right? There could be multiple ways. And for you, the key is to understand what channels actually will help you to distribute the content. I always share this example that we have experienced in an early stage of Fullfunnel.io journey, when we had a company that was selling to HVAC engineers of manufacturing companies. These people even don't have LinkedIn profiles. And if you'll open Facebook or Twitter or whatever, you quite often won't find them, right? So if you'll try to run ads or create content on LinkedIn, you'll waste time. So you'll be speaking to nobody, right? So you need to understand the channels through which you can distribute that content. That's the key. Now, the second part, I'm sorry, just wanted to, the second part here that you need to accept is that you shouldn't treat it as a one-time campaign, right? We'll do something, we'll measure the clicks, whatever, right? Unfortunately, again, nobody has, as we spoke, control over the B2B buying process, and you'll never know when the buying trigger will happen. So for you, it should be the same evergreen process that's basically, it should be actually the evergreen process that you run daily, that you run regularly. It's the same advice if you'll go to any doctor and the doctor will tell you that you need to have a healthy diet, right? If you want to avoid all the diseases, etc., right? Or that you need to do sport activities regularly if you want to stay healthy, right? Nobody is questioning this. And you don't question, okay, but what if I will do just 3 times and I won't have 6 abs, right? So should I quit it or should I continue, right? Obviously, we do these things until the end of the life. But from the business life perspective, for some reasons, we want to find shortcuts that we can do once, or whatever, better set up AI agents that will do it instead of us. But in reality, it doesn't work, right? So you need to deploy this program for the long term, and that's one of the keys. Sorry, I just wanted to share these thoughts, but feel free to jump in.
No, not at all. Not at all. I think what the folks are seeing who are watching us live here is an example of an 87 touch points journey, which took about 1 year of nurturing to create an opportunity. This was tracked in this case using Dream data. Hockey Stack is another solution that provides multi-touch attribution and will give you the account-based attribution as well. We don't, like Andrei mentioned, we don't often look at that. We look at it to see if we can share some cool examples with our audience more than to make our decisions. And I would like just to highlight what Andrei already mentioned. Focus on a few key channels and consistently creating native content for those channels. So instead of thinking about funnels, instead of thinking about, top of funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, etc., it's much more effective to think about how can I make sure that I am doing my activities on my different channels regularly and that they are of high quality. So how can I make sure, for example, Andrei mentioned we are using primarily LinkedIn newsletter. We run these live podcasts, right? How can I make sure that we run them every week and don't skip them? How can I make sure that we create a post for every LinkedIn post for every working day, and that our newsletter goes out every week? This should be the focus, because as you can see on this example, it can take a long time. These are 87 touch points that are measured by the marketing attribution software, and who knows how many other touch points, internal conversations and chats and in meetings that are happening behind the closed doors that you're not even aware of, right? So if you accept this, then the question becomes, okay, how can I make sure that not how can I make sure that I have then an 87 touch point email sequence, whether that's a nurture sequence or an email outreach sequence, but how can I make sure that basically I have content that is going out regularly and consistently on my channels? I think this should probably be the top questions that most teams should be asking themselves, instead of asking themselves about, hey, what is going to be the ROI of this specific piece of content or of this specific activity, right? Hey, what is, how can we, scale this process through AI agents or whatever other kind of things that companies might be asking themselves. So I think about this. And one last thing that I wanted to mention about this long-term strategy and thinking about it as an evergreen process is to share another practical tip. So we use this approach that we call weekly cadence or weekly content cadence. We use it with our clients, we use it ourselves. What is a weekly content cadence? Is essentially thinking about a theme for the week or a key topic for the week. So let's say this week we want to write about sales and marketing alignment. We have, if you remember what I said previously, we have our breakdown of this topic and the challenges related to sales and marketing alignment. We know that we can talk about the different levels of sales and marketing alignment. We can talk about specific challenges. We can talk about symptoms versus root causes. We actually have a post about that, etc., etc. So now we have done our homework. We know the breakdown. And then here is what we do, let's say, for that week. We agree in our case between Andre and myself, okay, hey, Andre, you can post about these topics. I can post about those topics. And then we'll make sure that the same week we have our live podcast is going to dive deeper into sales and marketing alignment, the same topic. We are going to actually use some of the assets, as you are seeing right now. What we are doing, we are using one of our LinkedIn posts and the assets we have created for that LinkedIn post to support our live podcast. This is something that we will often do. We will take the different diagrams that we might have produced for those LinkedIn posts of that week and use them as an asset during the live podcast. This we will get a lot of questions from our community that will allow us to dive much deeper into the topic and make our content even more relevant, addressing the questions that our audience has. And then we'll take all of that and package it into that week's newsletter, right? So, for example, last week, I think, or 2 weeks, excuse me, 2 weeks ago, we have done a live podcast about account-based content. Before that, we have posted about it. We had also one of our clients share a case study. We took all of that and produced a 4,000-word article, which I dropped also here in the chat, about account-based marketing content. So again, think about a weekly cadence, which will help you not have to reinvent the wheel every time. That will help you kind of align the content on the different channels, and will hopefully help you also be more consistent in your strategy. So this was one thing that I wanted to share. And
I was just
yeah, go ahead.
I was just smiling when you said like about 87 emails. I just imagined for a second a board meeting and CEO or somebody from key leadership asks, okay, how can we measure the success of our nurturing cadence? Oh, we can't really measure. We are on email 52. We need to wait. So jokes aside, sometimes, I mean, the attribution of session could be really driving companies into the wrong direction. And that's why I feel everything that you have shared is absolutely spot on. We need to understand that there is equal contribution of all exercises. Again, Sarah, we speak between ourselves a lot about sport and the food, the healthy lifestyle. So it's if I can give an example, it just imagine for a second if you'll ask, oh, so did my squats or push-ups actually contributed better to my health, right? Maybe I can quit some of them and just focus on more on this, double down, right? Okay, you need to do all of them because otherwise your body won't be developed equally. So the same, I mean, but you need to understand what exercises actually are helpful, right? So the same is here. So I just wanted to share this. And aside from the kind of the fact that it takes years, right? We need also to keep in mind that this, again, just highlighted this invisible engagement, right? It's one of the arguments that you just need to, especially in the beginning, you need to show that this is how actually we are buying. Quite often, when companies resist to invest more time into these activities, right, or they start questioning everything, you need to have internal conversations, or even launch an internal workshop discussing how did we make the last, expensive purchases as an organization, right? You can interview your CFO, your HR, your VP of sales, depending on what software or what vendor you brought internally, right? What influenced it? How long did it take to from the day when you first started talking internally that some things could be improved, right? How long did it take, and what actually influenced your decision? How did you select it? I think this one, this is one of the keys to overcome this, or to handle this objection internally. Like you can see this, again, another example, a person, and it's a funny that we have the screenshots overcoming the objection that it sounds funny, but these buyers will never reach out to you, right? And on contrary, the worldwide global brands sending these emails to us, so that's why sometimes we are smiling, right? And the person shares that I've been reading Vladimir's and mine content for years, but never ever we have seen anything, or even like a small thank you guys, the content is helpful, right? Until we receive this email. This is the reality. This is another thing that you need to accept and
I wanted to maybe share one again, very, very practical tip here related to this example. So the person reached out to us after we did a live podcast interview with one of our clients. And I think this is what I just wanted to highlight again, talking about demand generation. One of the best assets are case studies. And case studies are difficult to create. For a lot of companies, it takes a long time between their internal content team taking that, like maybe their sales team or the CS team finishing successfully the implementation, then communicating that to the content team, like getting that on their agenda, finally deciding to produce that content case study, then going to the company, the customer's company, to get an approval, doing the interview. It takes months, sometimes it takes up to a year before you actually have a case study. And then, unfortunately, these case studies are kind of run-of-the-mill, self-serving, a little bit about the client and their challenges, very generic, and then a lot about our solutions. It's a content that nobody really consumes. It's like there to do a kind of a check, to check it off your checklist. I've created a case study. And one thing that I've heard repeatedly from salespeople, we need more good case studies. So it's interesting that you have this need for good customer stories and case studies that salespeople can use in their conversations, and that it is so difficult and time-consuming to produce them, and then ending up with a result that is not so good. So this is like a recommendation that anybody can implement, is if you can get your customer to appear, if you have a podcast, it doesn't have to be a podcast, it can be a webinar, it can be any other type of collaboration, and you just interview them about the project and you let them share their story that is usually broader than just the product and the features that they used of your product, etc., what you typically see in the case studies, but actually to tell the whole story. Okay, this was the situation in our company, and this is what we were struggling, and this is what we tried previously, and it didn't work out. And then we decided to do it in a different way. And then like, okay, but we weren't sure because we needed to make sure that our team was ready and whatever. Like you hear the whole unfiltered story, and this is what customers want to learn. They don't want to learn about your features. They want to learn about these practical things. If I need to implement this, what will it mean? Who will I need to have internally to support me? What will you do as a vendor versus what I will have to do and my team, etc., etc., etc. Really hearing those details and seeing how this really looks like in another company such as yours. So the whole long story short is we don't have that problem with case studies. We just interview them, our customers. It takes us literally the 45 minutes or 1 hour that we spend with them during our live podcast, and bam, we have the case study. And as you can see in this example that we're sharing here, when we did this recently with one of our customers, 𝗬𝗪 from Charlesgate, we had immediately somebody reaching out to us. So these are very, very effective. Again, of course, this is not to say that case study is the hack and that this is what generated the demand. For sure not, as you can see in the email.
Not the case study, it was the podcast. That's why everybody says you need the podcast.
There you go. So I just wanted to share this as a practical remark, talking about demand generation, focus on case studies, but don't make it complicated and then ending up with a result that is not as useful for your demand generation. Try to just collaborate with the client and share their story, share their success, share the details, the nitty-gritty behind the scenes details of the implementation. This is going to be much, much more helpful for other prospects and for your demand generation efforts.
So we have more examples, and let's cover the questions that you also guys asked us about the dark social, right? So we spoke already a lot about the invisible part of the buyer journey. And also, if you guys follow 𝗵𝗪, he recently started publishing the reports from the interviews with CMOs, CTOs, etc. Interviewing, basically, I feel they're interviewing on steroids all possible senior buyer personas, but the insights are really great. And apparently, we all know this, but the stats prove that he spoke to 150 B2B CMOs about how they actually buy and what is the vendor research process. The majority of people mentioned that they don't start with Google, they start with referrals, peers, and if they are part of any community, they do it. And obviously the first conversations are happening internally, right? They basically speak to their colleagues, hey, what do you think could be the solution? Did you hear anything, right? And when this conversation actually happens, suddenly people start collecting different insights, right? Something has triggered this conversation. So somebody is active on LinkedIn, somebody is subscribed to the podcast. I mean, somebody is subscribed to newsletter, somebody is a part of the community, somebody has attended the webinar, right? Different. I don't necessarily think that the buying committee groups agree on whom to follow on LinkedIn or what events to attend, right? People do it obviously asynchronously. And then when they have this conversation, then people start sharing what they have seen, what they have learned, right? And this is what actually influences this so-called dark social, right? They see the post, they pick it up, and they share it. Oh, basically, you mentioned this challenge, and I have seen this great post. I thought it might be valuable. And this is how the awareness happens. Another example, somebody catches, a great piece of content, and this person is a part of a community, let's say CMO community or whatever, pavilion. And then this person comes to that community and shares, hey guys, I recently read a post about this and that, thought it might be valuable for you. Like, and this is how the distribution happens, right? So we just need to understand this, and this is the only way to influence it. You can't influence dark social without content, right? But also, you need to keep in mind that there are ways how you can proactively do it. Quite often we hear the objection, yeah, but I mean, let's say we're selling to IT audience. These people are not active on social. They have their like own communities, and sales people are not allowed to join, marketing people are not allowed to join these communities. What can we do in this case? Obviously, in this case, you need to joint efforts with your subject matter experts who actually have the same titles as your target buyer personas. And you need to implement a couple of other, let's say, approaches that belong to demand generation program. This is what we call the proactive demand gen, right? Not the passive one, not just running the ads and expecting that the people will come. But this is what you need to do with your sales and with your subject matter experts, right? You need to start all bound distribution, if you will. Inbound, it's when you publish it organically, when you promote it, etc. But then you need to initiate conversations. We always say that the best sources of let's say the best channel of distribution is your sales reps. They have conversations with target accounts, and you create this any piece of content in any format to actually influence, right, or to nurture your target accounts. So for sales, it's essential, and basically the key point, whenever they have an opportunity, they need to use these pieces of content to ignite the conversations, as you can see in this example. This is one story, right? But let's say that could be and then if you are part of any meaningful community, you can do it, or your subject matter expert should be doing it, like in the case of IT communities or healthcare, whatever, right? Another option, though, to become because to earn an opportunity to distribute or to engage, right, you need to create some sort of visibility and some sort of trust with these people. So there is another way how you can do it and influence it. It's just basically the content co-creation with your target accounts, with this buyer persona. So I think it could be a great story to share, Vlad.
Absolutely. So here, what a lot of people think when they think about content co-creation, this could be different examples. It could be some sort of an industry research that you're running, where you're interviewing your target accounts and prospects and maybe other influencers, let's say, in the industry. It could be a podcast where you're interviewing them. It could be maybe a webinar that you're running together with them, with a partner. You're running that with we mentioned previously, with your existing customers, kind of a live case study, etc., etc. Well, when people think about demand generation and content co-creation in these forms, they usually think about, okay, I'm going to create a piece of content, I'm going to promote and distribute this piece of content. This piece of content is going to actually do the awareness creation in demand generation for us. And while this is true, and while this is part of the goal, there is one very important aspect to content co-creation that we see a lot of companies miss. And this is what we call the micro networking, and has a lot to do with what Andrej was saying, with dark social. And how can I get, we hear a lot of companies are struggling to kind of increase their footprint within their target accounts. And what I mean by that is to influence more members of their buyer journey, of their buying, center, of the buying center or the buying committee, right? And the quote unquote micro networking is a great way to do it. So let me just explain very briefly what I mean by that. So in this case, one of our clients decided to launch a podcast where, because it was...
Again, you see the podcast.
The podcast is coming again. By the way, it doesn't even have to be that elaborate. You can do the exact same thing by co-creating LinkedIn posts, as simple as that, or community posts, or the example that Andrej shared earlier today was about this HVAC industry, which is like very, very obscure and not active on social. There, the client partnered with the association, and they did content collaboration with the association and the people from the industry. By the way, the more obscure, the more niche community is, the fewer buyers, the fewer online activity there is, the more opportunity there is. I always think back of a story when I actually had an opportunity to visit one of my first clients, invited me to visit their customer, excuse me. It was a manufacturing company, and the director, managing director of the company and the chief of IT spent 3 hours with, not just with me, obviously, they didn't spend that time just to show the marketing consultant their factory, but actually the prospect of my client. So there was somebody else, there was another factory who was interested in buying my client's software, and their existing customer invited the prospect for a visit, and I spent 3 hours with them, showing them everything, how they implement it, how they're organized, etc. And I was like, there I just had to ask. I was like, but why? I mean, I know you're running a manufacturing plant. There's always something going wrong. You have to stop the production. There is a problem. You're late on orders. The clients from all over the world are calling you, recalls, whatnot. And like, they're really one of the most busy people who are, by the way, not active on social. And I asked him, like, why did you do this? Why did you take like 3 hours of your such a busy schedule? And he said, you know what? Unlike you're like a marketer, you go on LinkedIn, you easily connect with other marketers. There's tons of content, there's tons of opportunities for you to network and learn about how the others like you are dealing with the problems that you have. And for me, this is not the case. This is like, for me, a unique opportunity for us, like as a company, a unique opportunity to meet with others, with our peers, and learn from them. So this whole story is just to show, like, when you have even like the most niche community, creating that platform from them where they can learn from each other. It doesn't matter how niche it is. It doesn't matter how, small the audience will be, but you will be able to use this micro networking. So let me explain what micro networking really is. So you are interviewing a target account, somebody from the industry. In this case, a client decided to do it as a podcast. Doesn't have to be a podcast. And in their case, it were actually CTOs, IT kind of profiles, which are typically very difficult to get. However, what's very interesting about this type of profiles, they like to learn from each other. They like to learn from it. They trust other experts. They don't trust vendors. They don't trust sales. They don't trust marketers. They trust their peers, and they want to know how are they dealing with the problems that they have as well. And so in this case, they were interviewing them and they were sharing them. So where does the magic happen? Does it happen because they saw an interview from another dude from the industry? No. The magic happened, well, it can happen in 3 different ways, and I will share the specific thing that happened here. So first of all, I'm interviewing, let's say Andre is working for a target account, and or somebody's interviewing me on a podcast, let's say, better. Let's say somebody's interviewing me on the podcast. Now, that person, the interviewer, can now share this podcast with Andre as well, my colleague. So colleagues of our guests might be interested to learn, hey, we just did this podcast with Vlad, and he was sharing with me all the cool things that you and your team, Andre, are doing at Fullfunnel. And I just wanted to drop here and share this with you. It's a perfect opportunity for you and the salespeople to connect with the other buyers within the buying committee. Also, their peers, other ICPs in the industry would, like I said, especially in these kind of niche industries, are really want to learn from each other. So it's, again, an opportunity for this micro networking. Actually, you didn't even have to go and connect with them proactively. You should, right? But even during this interview, let's say I'm interviewing Andre for my podcast, and I see that Andre is connected to Kari, let's say, from our audience, or Paul. all right? And I can just say, and let's say that I want to also build a relationship with Kari, and maybe like she's working for a target. Sorry, Kari, I don't think that's the case. It's just a fictive example. I might actually say, hey, Andre, I saw that you're connected with Kari Foster. Well, thank you for the wonderful interview you just gave. I saw you're connected with Kari Foster. Do you think she would be a good fit for the next guest for our podcast? And let's say Andre says yes. Then I could say, would you mind if I just emailed her with you in CC and just share that we just did this podcast? Why would he say no? Like, it's public information anyhow. So it's kind of like we talked about dark social as something mystical, but you can actually influence that dark social by using this co-creation to micro network with the other colleagues from the same company, so the rest of the buying committee and their other ICP, your target ICPs who are connected to your guest, the example of Kari, right? And basically get quote unquote referrals. It's not referrals in the sense of a client referring your product, but actually referring your content or getting in a relationship, in a conversation. Now, actually, in this very specific case, there was even a product referral. And maybe, Andre, you know this better. I lost some details. You can maybe just wrap it up there and with that example, and maybe share some other insights and about it.
Yeah, I would just drop a few things about the dark social part, because in reality, this was the activity. Let's say, let's make a step back and discuss why we even do this activity if it doesn't drive pipeline immediately, right? So why we spend time interviewing that person and then publish this podcast if we can't convert this person into a sales opportunity, right? Again, as we spoke, so peers, and especially in the closed communities, and this is the technical vertical, right? Peers love to learn from their peers, right? So what happened actually next? That person, he is not thought leader. He doesn't have a huge following. He maybe have like 1,000 connections on LinkedIn. But when he published actually a short snippet, that post generated like around 200 likes, a lot of comments. And this is, I mean, obviously this, we can say the vanity metrics, but I'm just sharing how that's, in a nutshell, the engagement from that one post was better than probably last 10 posts that was published by our client. This is the only one reason why I'm sharing this. But what actually happened is way more important. There was a person in a network who actually had a need, basically the person needed to ramp up the technical team. They were rolling out new project and they didn't have capacity to do it internally. So he reached out to this podcast guest and asked, hey, I have listened to this episode, fantastic insights. And I checked the company that interviewed you, like, are you a client of them? So this is, first of all, you can see what a fantastic perception this simple activity creates, because people, they don't understand if your guest is a client or partner or whatever. They immediately think, okay, somehow they have association with your company, with your brand, right? So there is some level of trust. And the guest said, no, we're not clients, but I also chatted with the guys and asked about their technical, capabilities, their experience, their case studies. And for me, they seem to be very robust vendor. So after this, the person went and submitted the website form on the website of our client. And how do we know this? Because again, the trained marketing team, during the discovery, they asked about the buyer journey and they have collected all of these insights. So this is one of the stories that we always share, right? But without this activity, never ever you would be able to create this opportunity. Obviously, what you see, the EasyJet, that's another story. So it's basically, it all started from the engagement with the CTO, but the opportunity actually came, if I'm correct, a year and a half later. So for us, it was a long-term project. And for us, apparently, it was nice to see. And the podcast itself, it was just the introductory opportunity, but it wasn't treated as an opportunity or whatever, a trap for guests to, to pitch your services. So we did it for these two reasons: connecting with these people, but also co-creating the content that the industry is actually willing to consume. And this is another huge benefit of the demand gen program. So lastly, we have, and maybe just to wrap it up, we have this amplification audiences, right, as an basically explanation part why we don't need to create the content only internally or only with, let's say, with the potential clients. We need to engage with multiple assets, and somehow we already mentioned this, right? This could be associations, this could be industry communities, this could be partner companies that are serving the same target audience but selling non-competing products, right? And whenever you start this collaboration, so first of all, you gain the credibility from, you kind of borrow a part of the brand of people or companies you co-create content with, right? And next, you merge the distribution. You create multiple touch points, and you gain access to the untapped audience that you couldn't create awareness in a different way. I feel that one of the most interesting things, let's say non-obvious audiences here are engagers. So I would love to lastly ask you, Vlad, to describe engagers and why it makes sense to collaborate with them.
Absolutely. I think this is something that marketers actually forget. True marketing is marketing to the whole market. It's marketing not only to the decision makers, which somehow in B2B is something that we do and that a lot of companies tend to do. And it is about marketing to the complete ecosystem that is surrounding your decision makers. And another way to think about it is that people are channels too. So if you're asking yourself, hey, you know, our audience is not very active on social, or maybe is not engaging in the same way as yours, right? It's very difficult to get to them. Well, a lot of these examples that we are sharing today are exactly when you can't reach those decision makers directly, you reach them via people and maybe brands that they actually know and follow. So the one specific example, excuse me, Andre, you called out the engagers. So we spoke about the buying center and how you can influence. We spoke about, you know, working with partners, thought leaders, etc. But engagers are simply people who are in the industry. They're active online, for example, or in a community or on LinkedIn or wherever, and they are connected to your target buyers. So they will never become your customer. They are not your ICP. They're just people who are from the industry connected to your target buyer. Why do they matter? Well, they matter because they're connected to your target buyers, and they, through their engagement with your content, the target buyers can discover you. So the example here that is, maybe you can't see it, it says, how did you hear about us? And the answer is, a marketing connection of mine reposted your content on LinkedIn. I started following because it's simply the best B2B ABM content I've seen. So that's exactly the engager. Like engager, somebody who is engaging with the content that we share. He or she reposted our content, and that's how their connection, who was an ICP target buyer, that's how they discovered our content. So people are channels too. Whenever you are thinking about marketing, think about it more broadly than just marketing to the decision makers. And also, if you're a salesperson and you are working with marketing and using content to engage with your target buyers, also don't ignore other people in the industry who are active on social communities, etc., because as you can see, they can create awareness with your decision makers and other buyers too. So with that, maybe it's a way to also wrap it up with these examples that we shared today about demand generation in action. Hopefully you got some good new insights. We didn't want to share the standard demand generation high level advice. We wanted to get into these nitty-gritty, unobvious examples here. So let us know if you're still with us. I know some people had to log out on the hour. Please let us know what you thought of this. If it was useful, you can also just share a thumbs up or thumbs down in the comments. And next week, what we want to do is, I know that a lot of you are struggling, not because you don't know what to do, but you're struggling because your colleagues, maybe the leadership team, maybe sales team, to get their buy-in, and they're having objections as to why you should do this kind of demand generation or ABM, and they don't see directly the link to the pipeline and revenue. So next week we want to dive deeper into these objections, the most common objections that people get from leadership and sales, and how you might address them, how we address them, how our clients address them with our clients. So stay tuned and see you next week. And don't forget, in only 3-4 weeks, the end of March, the last week of March, we're doing our big summit this time. 20 people are going to join us live, as this one live, but you will not only be able to interact with us, but also with other amazing B2B leaders, such as John Miller, and a lot of actually our clients are decided to also join us and share their unfiltered case studies. Many other people are going to share their kind of case studies and programs, what actually works in 2025. I'm super excited about it. So thank you so much for coming, and see you next week in another Fullfunnel Live.
Thanks a lot, guys. See you in 1 week. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.